How's it going, guys? Shizukat's here, and welcome to part 2 of my Tikilen guide. In part 1, we went over what units and items I think you should be preparing to take on the Tikilen Cup. If you haven't checked out that video, I'll leave a link down in the description so you can go watch that video as well. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at all the aspects of the fight itself so that you can go into it as prepared as possible. Before we begin, let's go over a couple disclaimers. The first is the same as part 1. This is an extremely difficult fight, and a decent chunk of the player base will not be able to beat her on release. However, the content is permanent, so you can always come back later once you have a better roster or better equipment and try again. Second, this video will obviously contain spoilers for the fight. If you don't want to be spoiled on the fight mechanics and would prefer to go in blind first, I advise you close the video now and come back later. Third, the information presented in this video will be based on the Japanese release, so the HP, shield points, etc. may have been changed for the English release. That being said, pretty much everything else up to this point gameplay-wise has followed JP, so for now I'll just assume that the Tikilen Cup is no different. Now then, with the disclaimers out the way, let's get on to what you're all here for, the Tikilen fight. Let's first start by taking a look at their stats. Tikilen has around 300,000 HP, while each of her adds have around 180,000 apiece. For comparison purposes, the battle-tested NPCs have around 135,000 HP each. For shield points, Tikilen has a default value of 25, the left add has 15, and the right add has 14. For weaknesses, Tikilen is weak to bow, fan, and light, and the two adds have the same weaknesses as each other: spear, bow, lightning, and light. With all three of them being weak to bows and light, these are our preferred avenues of attack, while spear and lightning can be utilized effectively against the two adds. Finally, for their speeds, Tikilen has 295 speed, while the adds have 238. Next, let's look at their attacks. We'll start with the adds first, since the list of possible actions is much shorter than Tikilen's and is an easier starting point. Starting with the right add, her regular attack is a one-hit dark, and her aura action, when she starts glowing, is a team-wide attack and magic up buff for 3 turns. The left add's regular attack is also one-hit dark, but unlike the right add, it has a chance to inflict blind for 3 turns. Her aura action is a team-wide regen buff for 3 turns, which heals the adds for around 6,000 HP per turn, and Tikilen for around 10,000 HP per turn. Both adds have a unique third attack that you'll definitely want to know about going into the fight, and that's their counter stance. On any given turn, either add or both adds can enter a stance for 1 turn, which will allow them to counter any physical attacks for around 1500 damage. Thankfully, the adds using their counter stance is telegraphed. You can tell they're going to use it if they have priority on their action that turn. That is, if they're going first in the turn order. If you see either or both of the adds going first, you should avoid hitting them with physical attacks for the turn, and they can't do a thing to hurt you. Feel free to use these counter turns to apply buffs or debuffs to your party, and resume attacking once the counter stance is over. You can also just switch to using magic on these turns with units like Mabel, since the counter only applies to physical attacks. The left add has one last action, which restores Tikilen's shields by 3. This action is only ever used when Tikilen is at 6 or less shields. However, the left add is also forced to use this action if Tikilen is at 6 or less shields, making it very abusable. If you can keep attacking Tikilen so she stays within that 6 or less threshold, the left add will never do any other action besides restore her shields. Between this mechanic and the physical counters being telegraphed, you can stay very safe and prevent a lot of incoming damage. Next, let's take a look at Tikilen's actions. Pretty much all of the actions that she can take in the fight reflect her actual kit when she becomes a playable character. On the physical side, she has access to a 1-hit AoE sword and 3-hit random target sword. On the magic side, she has 2 different 1-hit single target wind attacks, one of which is used early on in the fight and the other which is more powerful and used later on in the fight. She also has 2-hit AoE wind, 3-hit wind random target, and for her aura attack, which she uses late into the fight, she'll use a 4-hit wind random target. Against weaker units such as 4 stars with lower HP and magic defense, this aura attack can potentially kill in 2 hits. For this reason, you will want to prepare magic down with debuffers like Viola or Kurtz, as well as magic defense buffs such as Millard's or Mabel's, to ensure that your units don't end up getting KO'd by this attack. Another potential defensive route is to utilize a tank with taunts such as Gilderoy. However, even with a tank, you will want to make sure you're applying the proper buffs and debuffs, or else your tank might even end up getting one-shot. Other various actions Tikilen can take include healing her own HP by around 6,000 points, or increasing her speed by 20% for 5 turns, which will bring her speed up to 354. Late into the fight, starting at around 40 HP, Tikilen will enter the crit phase, where she becomes invulnerable to any attacks that are not critical hits, including shield cracks from thieves. This also means that Tikilen is effectively immune to magic during this phase, since magic is unable to crit. She will also reduce her maximum shield points to 7, but if she was already at less than 7 shields before entering the crit phase, her shields will remain where they were, which means that you can try to cheese this phase by having her cross the HP threshold when her shields are below 7. After breaking Tikilen in her crit phase, she will return back to her usual 25 shields once she comes out of break. I've heard from other JP players that it is possible to enter the crit phase more than once in a single fight, but if that happens, then it means the fight is going on extremely long. Realistically, players should be seeing only one crit phase in their Tikilen fight. Later on, once more power creep has entered the game, players will be able to kill Tikilen from around 45 to 50% HP, thus avoiding the crit phase altogether. For now though, you will be running into this phase, so it's important to know that it's there and what approach you need to deal with it. Now that we know everything that these three are capable of, let's do a quick rundown of what you should be looking to do at every stage of the fight. The early stages of the fight are the most dangerous, so our highest priority is setting ourselves up to be in a stable position moving forward. Debuff Tikilen with anti-attack from Viola or Kurtz to reduce her incoming damage, and make sure you're always recasting your debuff periodically as well. Additionally, set up regen with a regen caster such as Teo to keep the team healthy at all times, while also using a burst healer such as Hasumi, Millard, or Mina to make sure that the party is topped off, since the enemy's damage output will likely exceed the healing granted by Teo's regen alone. You can also utilize defensive buffs from characters like Hasumi, Millard, and Mabel to reduce incoming damage further if needed. On the offensive side, use AoE multi-hit attacks like Scarecrow or Camilla's AoE bow attacks to chip down the entire enemy team's shields. Make sure you're keeping an eye on the adds position in the turn order. If they're going first, that means they're going to use their physical counter, so you'll either want to spend that turn attacking with magic or doing other things like refreshing defensive buffs, or even applying offensive buffs to prepare for a break. You can also spend these turns attacking Tikilen only with physical attacks, and if you can quickly bring her down into that 6 or lower shield range, it'll basically disable the left add and make the fight much more manageable. As long as you're not attacking the units that put up the physical counter with physical attacks, you're good to go. One thing you'll want to watch out for is when the adds come out of break. Units coming out of break will always go first in the turn order, so the adds have a chance to use their physical counter, but they could also just use their normal actions. To be on the safe side, don't use any physical attacks that can hit the adds the turn that they come out of break. As far as unit priority goes, you'll want to be clearing the adds first, with the add on the right being more important to kill first, since you can cheese the left add by locking her into restoring Tikilen's shields. In fact, I would actually recommend trying not to break Tikilen at all until the adds are dead, instead trying to consistently keep her at 6 shields or less so you can continue cheesing the left add. By the time both adds are dead, assuming you've been hitting Tikilen with some AoE attacks along the way, she'll probably be somewhere around 60 to 70% HP. At this point, she's all alone and won't be using any super scary attacks on you yet, so use this opportunity to stabilize your entire party before proceeding. Once she's at around 40%, she will enter the crit phase. You're going to want to use a unit like Ashlyn to reduce her shields consistently turn by turn. When she's going to use her aura attack, she will always be going last, so you can use this opportunity to set up whatever heals, debuffs, and buffs you need before she acts, to try to minimize the incoming damage. As long as you can survive that attack, you should be pretty much home free. And that pretty much wraps up my guide on the Tikilen fight. The one aspect of the fight that most players are going to have problems with is simply having enough HP and defensive stats to survive the early portions of the fight, when all 3 enemies can attack you in full force. If you're able to survive that early onslaught and stabilize, you should be pretty good to go for the rest of the fight. While the Tikilen Cup is the kind of fight where you can play it slow and steady, some of the other champions later on won't show such kindness, so keep that in mind moving forward. Thanks for watching everyone, this has been Shizukats, and until next time, see ya!